Okay? Let's begin. Mishpatim. Ve'ela ha-mishpatim asher tosim lefneim. So there's a famous Rashi. Rashi says, Kol mokom shenemar ela. If it just would have said the word ela without the vav, it's like a new chapter, a new paragraph. Posel es harishonim. There's no connection to what was before. The ela, by saying the and, it connects to what was before. What was before? The Ten Commandments, Har Sinai. To teach you that just like the Aseres Hadibros, the Ten Commandments were given at Har Sinai, so too were all these laws that concern Bet Din, court, damages. All these laws were given at Har Sinai. Okay, and it's very important to understand that, and we're going to talk about it tonight, what examples, but the laws of damages is complicated. Because what you assume is innocent and guilty is not so obvious. Because we learn damages from the cases of an animal. For example, an animal falls into a pit, bore, or an animal eats with his mouth, damages through eating, or fire. You know, these are the guidelines that we apply to people. And I'll give you an example. A person, the Gemara says, Odom muad la'olam. A person is always responsible for the damages they do. That means even if you're sleeping, let's say you're in a hotel room, you're sleeping, and during your sleep you're rolling over, and when you roll over, your hand hits the lamp and knocks the lamp down. You argue, I was sleeping, it was an accident. I agree with you. We have to replace the lamp. You're obligated for the damages. But people take that a little bit too far and don't understand the implications. And we'll go a little bit further. Let me give you another example, okay? Here you live in Lefrak, okay? You don't own these units, do you? No. Imagine you lived in a co-op where you own the units, okay? 50% or 100%, whatever it is, you're a stockholder. You live in a condo. So you, for example, you have the first floor unit, and I'm directly above you. All of a sudden, you're sitting around your dining room table, and you look up, and you see drip, 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 drip.
Water leaking.
Water leaking. And the pipes in the ceiling are from my apartment. So you come running upstairs, and you say to me, I think the pipe is breaking from your apartment. I say, oh no, and I go right away and I turn off the water, the main. We come back downstairs. By that time, the entire ceiling has crashed down. Water is everywhere. You have a wood floor. The wood floor is buckling. The table got ruined. The ceiling came down, and we see the pipe had cracked. Okay. So you say to me, I assume this is your pipe for your apartment, that you're going to cover the damages. Okay? Well, let's go to Beit Din. Let's ask a question. You know what the Beit Din is going to rule? I don't have to pay your damages. Why? Because I didn't cause your damages. That means
Okay, who caused the
the pipe. The pipe broke. That means even though it was the pipe to my apartment, but I didn't damage you. I didn't smash the pipe, I didn't damage you. Pipes break, it's called ones. It's something you can't anticipate.
So insurance covers it.
And maybe the insurance covers it. And it's called grama. I caused the damage, but I didn't do the damage. Now, if you told me about the damage, and I simply twirled my thumbs and didn't do anything, I might be liable. But the minute you told me about it, I immediately turned off the water. So I acted responsibly. Okay? So this is a case brought down in the papers here, where a person says, that you assume that I'm obligated to pay because it was my pipe. But the short answer is, no, I'm not. Because even though it's a damage caused from my property, it's not a damage that I caused directly. And therefore, since I didn't cause it directly, in this case, where the pipe burst suddenly, and he dealt with it promptly, he is not liable for the damage by the water. That's what the Beit Din paskin. If he were negligent in dealing with a problem, he would be liable. Okay? When a person's property damages, he's only liable if he was negligent looking after it. But as long as I wasn't negligent, I'm not liable. Now I'll give you another example, nothing to do with Bet Din. In Reader's Digest, they have an article called You Be the Judge. It's an article called You Be the Judge. It gives you real cases. Here's a case of a lady who lives in a complex like Lefrak. And there was a snow, and she was walking, and she tripped on ice, and went up, fell down, broke her hip. She was off work for 6 months. So she sued, let's say Lefrak, she sued the condominium or the complex for, let's say, $100,000. The complex showed that when it stopped snowing, they had people who cleaned away the snow, which they did. And they salted, which they did. They argued that we did what was reasonable. You can't get away every piece of ice. They don't sit there with a blow dryer, drying up the snow. There's a certain responsibility where you have to also be careful where you walk. Mm-hmm. It's not just about me. So they proved that they cleaned up and they did everything properly. Did she win her lawsuit or did she lose her lawsuit? She lost. The lower court ruled that because the complex dealt with the snow removal in a timely fashion and in a responsible fashion, as would be expected, they did what was normal, what was usual, she lost. She filed an appeal. She claimed in her appeal that on the side by the grass, there's a drainage ditch which was blocked. And because the complex did not clear away the drainage ditch,
like a gutter.
The gutter, water pooled, froze overnight, created black ice. That was irresponsible. And this appeals court agreed with her and overturned the judgment.
And she won.
And she won. So she didn't win because they didn't clear away the snow.
It was negligent.
They created a hazardous environment. Had they kept the drainage ditches clear,
The water will go.
and the water then, as it melted, could have flowed off, then she would have lost again. But she found something that they did not do that was negligent. Okay? So, not everything is as obvious. The lower court ruled against her. She got lucky on the appeal. She found something that she did not find when she first filed her complaint. Okay, so it's important to know. It's interesting
How she proved it? How is it possible?
Well, she went back with pictures and she found the drainage ditch and she saw that it was blocked. Sometimes when it rains, when there's a lot of rain, you get water through your ceiling in the house. Usually, why that happens is that your gutters are blocked. Because the house
Leaves.
gutters are blocked with leaves, so the water can't run out and pools back into the house. So you have to clean your gutters just to keep your house safe from the roof. The roofs are not waterproof. They may give you the impression they're waterproof, but they're not waterproof. So there are things you need to do that has nothing to do with water. Cleaning out the gutters. Once a year you should do that. So if you're a landlord and someone is renting and there's damage inside and you say to the person living there, it's your responsibility, the question is, whose job is it to clean out the leaves of the gutters? The person who's renting or the person who owns the house? Well, you got to figure that out because the damage inside the house did not come from the rain alone. It came from the leaves in the gutter. So very often you have to figure out where the damage starts. And then you can figure out who's responsible for it. It's not always obvious. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It says over here that you should put the halachos before you. Rashi says, keshulchan aruch, like a set table. Everything has its place. Fork, knife, spoons, plates, salt shaker, napkin, everything has to be organized. The Satmar Rebbe, before we get to Satmar, what it means is that Rashi says like a table where you sit down to eat to enjoy the meal. So you say, what would it mean by to enjoy the meal? Are we supposed to enjoy the mitzvahs? And the answer is, to some degree, yes. That means a person has a mitzvah to give tzedakah. What is the purpose of giving tzedakah? Obviously, one answer is, so a poor person who has no money can have money. I got that. But the truth is, by giving tzedakah, it's supposed to make you, from giving charity, to changing you to be a charitable person. It's a very big difference. That means giving tzedakah is one thing. You give charity, that's very nice. But if you're a grouch, and you're just mean, and the tzedakah didn't change you, it didn't do what it was meant to do. You're supposed to be a charitable person. It's supposed to make you a kind, generous person in everything. The way you teach, the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you act. Keeping Shabbos is a wonderful thing. It gives you an opportunity to spend time with the family, the rest. But if you don't enjoy the Shabbos, if you don't let the Spirit penetrate you and make you happy, you lose a little bit of what's involved. They asked the question, why is Pashas Mishpatim here? It's like it's sandwiched in. We just had Har Sinai, and next week we're going to talk about building the Mishkan. So the answer is, because to build the Mishkan, you need money. Moshe's going to collect money. Great. But what kind of money does he want? He wants kosher money. Yeah. How do you know if your money is kosher? Pashas Mishpatim. That means Moshe's not interested in you giving money to the Mishkan as a plan for you to money launder your money. That wasn't the purpose. It wasn't money laundering. It was to give a donation from kosher money, not money you stole, not money you took the wrong way. There are 4 sections of Shulchan Aruch. There's Orach Chaim, which deals with day-to-day life. How to daven, how to read the Torah. It deals with Shabbos, Yom Tov, Pesach, all the Chagim. Then you have Yoredeya, the next section. Deals with Shechita, Treifus, Malicha, Bas Mecholav, Taruvas, Kashrus. Talks about laws of not charging interest on money. Talks about laws of Nida. Talks about respecting parents, respecting teachers. It talks about the laws of mourning, Avelut. The 3rd volume is Even Ezra. Talks about marriage, divorce, Yibum, Chalitza. And the 4th volume, Choshen Mishpat, talks about monetary damages. How to be a good neighbor, what happens if you damage, who's kosher to be a witness, how to be a witness, the laws of Beit Din. So the Satmar Rebbe asked, he says, you would think that it's so important to know how to conduct yourself and how to be honest in business and how to be a good neighbor and who's a kosher witness. Why wasn't that first? After all, right after Har Sinai, what's the first section we talk about? Mishpatim, Choshen Mishpat. He gives a very fascinating answer. He says, when you come to Beit Din, the Beit Din always asks you, do you want the strict interpretation of the law, or do you want us to find a compromise? Sure, compromise. If this would have been the first Shulchan Aruch that you learned, you know what you would think in life? Everything is compromise. I can't keep Shabbos, no problem, we'll find the compromise. I can't keep kosher, no problem, we'll find the compromise. The answer is, when it comes to davening, tefillin, mezuzah, there's no compromise. When it comes to kashrus, there's no compromise. When it comes to rules of marriage and divorce, there's no compromise. It's only money. Only when it comes to money can we have compromise. So they don't want you to think right away, compromise, compromise, compromise. They want you to think more towards the end. So they put it at the very end, Choshen Mishpat, so it's not the first thing you think about. That's what the Satmar Rebbe said. Very fascinating answer. Now, there's a Zohar HaKodesh, which is very important to understand. The Zohar HaKodesh says, and listen carefully to the Zohar HaKodesh. He says, I'll give you an example. I lent this guy $10,000. I know him. I gave it to him cash. I didn't have witnesses. But I trusted him. He's an honest guy. When I go to him and I say to him, David, I want my money, I lent you $10,000. He says, no, you only gave me $1,000. And I paid you back $1,000. Okay. Now, I know 100% he's lying. He's lying. I gave him $10,000. I know what I did. I say to him, we're going to go to Bet Din. We're in front of Bet Din, 3 rabbis, and I say I gave him $10,000. So they say to me, the normal question, do you have witnesses? No. I trusted him. Do you have a receipt, a document? No. I trusted him. He shows that he had 2 witnesses when he paid me back the $1,000, which is true, and I gave him a receipt. So the Bet Din says, what do you want? You have no witnesses. He has a witness that he paid you back the $1,000. He only says that I borrowed $1,000. So what can we do? I lost the case.
No witness, no nothing.
Nothing. So now I walk out of Bet Din and I'm furious. One is my first reaction, he's a crook. And the Bet Din was bought off, or they don't know what they're talking about. Why did I go to a bunch of rabbis? All rabbis are crooks. I'm furious because I know 100% what was right, whatever the circumstances are. So the Zohar HaKodesh says, Eila HaMishpatim, these are the laws that Hashem gave Lifneihem. Look at what happened in the past. Lifneihem means from before. See, you don't know the whole story. 10 generations ago, his grandfather, right, lent my grandfather $10,000. And my grandfather only gave him back $1,000. So for 10 generations, I owed him $9,000. My family owed him. Now, the record is set straight. That's what the Zohar HaKodesh says. The Zohar HaKodesh says, when you come to Bet Din, you have to remember that on their shoulder, behind them, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem is there. And you have to understand that nobody at the end of the year has $1 more or less than they're supposed to have. So he's not going to walk away with $1 more, and I'm not going to have $1 less. But I know that this was an injustice. You're right. But you have limited vision. You only know based on what you see. Mm-hmm. You have no way of knowing what happened 500 years ago. So the Zohar says, accept everything that happens because there is justice in the world, even though you don't see it.
But another question.
Now that's you have to believe. I mean, this is something you have to believe. Yes.
Why we should be responsible for other father?
That's what we do. Families, there is something called a Gilgul. We are mechaper. We do these things. Esther did things. Purim is coming up. And they say Esther and Mordechai had to fix the mistakes of Shaul HaMelech. So Shaul HaMelech was her great-great-great-grandfather. It was 3 or 4 generations earlier. That's what happens. There are Gilgulim. Certain people lived later, fixed the Chet of Adam Arishon, or Moshe, or Noach. Somehow, we have to realize that there's a timeline. And the history is all connected and is a woven, it's a weave, it's a woven picture. And it's important to understand how these pictures work. Okay. There's a halacha, don't take bribes. Because if you take bribes, it confuses you, it blinds you. Okay. Who does that halacha apply to? Everybody thinks it applies to judges. Don't bribe a judge.
Yeah, but
right? How would you like to know that it applies to you and to you and to you and to you? And you have to be very careful because every single day you fall victim to bribes. Why? Because every person makes 100 decisions every single day. You make decisions when you get up in the morning, how you deal with your wife, how you deal with your family, how you deal with your kids, how you deal with school, how you deal with your job. You're making decisions. And you never know what might influence your decision. And those are bribes. I have a rabbi who calls me up whenever he wants me to sit on a din Torah. You know what he says to me? He says to me, you have to sit on this din Torah, only you can solve this case. If you're there, I know everything will be 100% the way it should be. That's a bribe. Because now when I go, I want to not disappoint this guy. This guy believes in me so much. So now if he takes a position that I think is wrong, I may not say it's wrong because then he'll be angry at me and he won't call me for the next time. That's a bribe. A bribe is not always money. Sometimes someone gives you a compliment, and because of that, you're going to make a decision that you would not normally have made. You just took a bribe. You just violated the Torah. I'll give you an example. It says that the Sanhedrin would decide when there should be a leap year. Right? They have 2 Adars. Who sat on the Sanhedrin? The king was a member of the Sanhedrin, so was the Kohen Gadol. When the decision was to have a leap year, the king had to walk out of the room, and so did the Kohen Gadol. They were not allowed to be there. Why? Because the king would pay his soldiers every month, right? So now if there was a leap year, how many months is that year? 13. So it would cost him $100,000. So he couldn't be trusted in making the decision. It was a bribe. The Kohen Gadol. We're standing now in February, March. They're talking about having a leap year. You know what the Kohen Gadol's thinking? On Yom Kippur, they have a mikveh outside, and I got to go to the mikveh 5 times or 10 times.
Yeah.
If the Yom Kippur is in September, the weather outside is 70 degrees. It's not bad. But if we have a leap year, and now it's the end of October, what's the temperature going to be? 40 degrees. It's going to be cold. I don't want it. No leap year. He has to walk out of the room. So you don't even realize that even something like a leap year, people had biases. And because they had biases, it was considered, it was like a bribe. They couldn't be there. I'll give you a case. Listen to this case in the business halacha. Let's say, for example, I am a contractor, and I am able to redo kitchens and bathrooms. Okay? So this fine gentleman here hires me to redo his kitchen and 2 bathrooms. And we negotiate a price, $20,000, and I agree, and I start the job. I'm halfway through. He paid me my $10,000 so far, and I'm working on his kitchen and his bathrooms. All of a sudden, someone I know comes over to me and says, we have a contract with Left Rack City to redo all the kitchens and bathrooms in Left Rack City. You know how many kitchens and bathrooms that are? It's 500 kitchens and bathrooms. The contract is worth $10 million. Are you in? So, of course I'm in, $10 million. Okay, we start tomorrow. I said, no, I can't. I'm in the middle of a job right now. I can't start tomorrow. I'll start in 2 weeks. He says, no. We're starting tomorrow. Get out of the job. Otherwise, I'm going to go somewhere else. So I go over to you, and I say to you, listen, I know I said I would do your kitchen and bathrooms. I have a chance now to make $10 million. Big job. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to find somebody else to finish your kitchen and bathroom. Someone as good as me, he's better than me. And the $10,000 is the same price, no difference. So I'm offering you to find somebody else to finish your kitchen and bathrooms. Quality work, the cost is the same. You know what you say to me? That's very nice of you. I want you. We have a contract. I'm not letting you out, even for $10 million. What's the halacha? Can you hold me to the contract? You know what the halacha is? Yes, you can.
Because you signed the contract.
Because you signed the contract. Had we been an hourly wage, had I said I'm going to work, and for every hour you owe me $10, I could quit. Because every hour is a new contract, it's a new thing. I could quit. But if we have a contract, so one of the most important things in a contract is what's called the escape clause. If I have experience, I should have put in the contract. However, if I cannot complete the job, you agree that I can find somebody else to complete the job for the same cost. I should have put that in the contract. A man who has experience. So when people come to me with contracts and they want me to review, what?
They usually
The first thing I tell people, when they come to me with contracts, and I read contracts every day, the first thing I say to them is, I know the two of you are becoming partners, you're going to, hopefully you'll work together for 50 years. What happens if it goes bad? How do you get out of the contract? So right away they say, no, we're not thinking about getting out of the contract. I say, I know that. Right now, it's the honeymoon stage. You just met each other, and you both love each other, and you both have no problems with each other. But I know that the honeymoon stage is over very quickly. And what's going to happen if one of you went out? What's the rules? And they can't wrap their head around it. And I try to explain to them, the most important part of going into a contract is how to get out of the contract if you're going to get out. Had I put in our contract that if I need to get out of the contract and I find somebody else I could, I'd be a $10 million richer man. But because I didn't put it in, I'm stuck. Now, it's not so simple, because as a rabbi, I would try to explain to you that having someone work in your kitchen and bathroom who doesn't want to be there doing the job is not a very good idea. Because he won't do a good job, his heart's no longer in it. And as long as you're not losing anything, I would say to you, let the guy out of the contract. I would advise you to release him. But that's where the Beit Din comes in and tries to help you. Okay, listen to this. The Chidah, the famous Chidah. The Chidah wrote a sefer called Shem HaGedolim. In there, he writes about a judge, a Dayan from Egypt, known as Reb Chaim Kafusi. And he was very well known and very highly respected. Towards the end of his life, he became blind. He couldn't see. And the Chidah writes that when he would sign his name, you could see that he couldn't see because he just couldn't sign his name straight. It was very hard to read. So people started talking. The Torah says that if you take bribes, what does it do? It blinds your eyes. This guy must have taken bribes. And that's why Hashem punished him, that he should be blind. That's what people said. So he was insulted. He was very hurt by this. So he davened to Hashem and he said, please, give me back my eyesight. My reputation is at stake. The Chidah writes that the next day his eyesight returned, he could see 20/20. And whenever he signed his name now, he would sign his name, Hashem Nisi, God who performed miracles for me, Chaim Kafusi, like it rhymes. And the Chidah says, I saw how he signed his name afterwards, it was perfect, like a person who could see perfectly. So he brings down, very, very interesting, the Chidah, that here we have a story of someone who they accused him falsely of taking bribes because he lost his eyesight. It was a lie, it wasn't true, and he davened to Hashem, and Hashem saved his reputation by giving back his eyesight back, which is something very, very fascinating. There's a halacha. Halacha says if I lend you money, so let's say a mortgage. So if you do a mortgage, what secures the mortgage? The house. You don't pay the mortgage, the bank takes the house. Let's say I lend this guy $10,000. Now I'm not sure if he's going to pay me back, so I want something as security. So he has a Rolex watch. Did you know he had a Rolex watch?
Not today.
You didn't know, right?
Soon as
He had a Rolex watch, an original Rolex watch. So he gave me the Rolex watch that I should hold, and when he gives me back the $10,000, I'll give him back the Rolex watch.
Make sure it's not fake.
Right, make sure it's not fake. He told me it's a real Rolex watch. And I believe him. I gave him $10,000. He already cheated me. What? We're not going to go there. Okay. Now, the halacha is that if he needs the watch, let's say he says to me, I have to go on a business appointment, I can't be late, I need my watch, I have to give him back the watch, and then at the end of the day, when he comes back home, he gives it back to me, and back and forth, which seems silly, but that's the halacha. The Gemara talks about a person who has a coat. He gives me his coat to hold because I lent him $100. But now it's winter time, so I can give him his coat so he can go to work. When he comes back from work, he gives me back his coat. Then he goes back and forth. So the Tzos HaChoshen brings down a Zohar. He says, why is that? He says, because you know why? The way you judge a person, Hashem judges you. And every night we give Hashem our neshamos and we say, here, hold on to this. Do me a favor, tomorrow give it back. If I don't return the Rolex, Hashem says, oh, you don't like giving back things? I also don't like giving back things. Would that be good for me? No. So it wouldn't be a good thing. So therefore, the Ketzos brings down from the Zohar, he says you got to be very careful When someone gives you back something, gives you something to hold, you can hold it. But if he needs it, give it back to him. Because you do that every day with Hashem, and you got to be very careful. It says, "B'anshe kodesh tiyuni," you have to be holy people. You find an animal. Let's say you have a herd of sheep. And you go out to the field, and there's your sheep, and there's one sheep that a wolf ripped apart. You can't eat that sheep. It's not kosher anymore. It's treif. What should you do with the sheep? Who do you give it to?
Wolf.
To what?
To wolf.
Well, the wolf came and was chased away. La kele tashlichuno. So you give it to the dog. Hashem rewarded the dogs because when we left Egypt, the dogs didn't bark. A lot of different reasons. Okay. So the Yerushalmi says, hold on here, time out. Whose job is it to watch the sheep? The dog. He's a sheepdog, right? If the wolf got to the sheep, it means the dog didn't do his job. So why did we reward him with a steak? We give him a steak dinner now.
Because they didn't make a noise.
Right, he didn't make a noise, so we reward him. Let's say you have this guy, the guy with the Rolex, you don't know that he has a jewelry store. And he has a guard that watches. One day the guard fell asleep and the jewelry store got robbed. Now what does he do with the guard? He fires him. He doesn't give him a raise. Right? So the dog is supposed to watch the sheep, the dog failed. You know what the Yerushalmi says? Very interesting. He says, you're right. 364 days, that sheepdog watched the sheep without a problem. One day he messed up. You don't punish a person for one day. You give him the sheep that was ripped apart because for 364 days he did a good job.
Then he will like it and do it everything.
Well, then you get rid of the dog. That's when it's time to find yourself a new dog. Okay, but otherwise, it's fascinating. It's fascinating how we reward how. Again, it's a concept. The Torah, the mitzvahs are teaching us how to conduct ourselves. It says, "Kol almona v'yosam lo sa'anu." Do not oppress a widow or an orphan.
Yes.
Okay? Ki im tza'ok elai, because if you oppress them, and they cry out to me, shamoa eshma sa'akoso, I'm going to hear their cry. Because remember, a widow doesn't have a husband to stand up for her. An orphan doesn't have a father to stand up for her. So Hashem says, I'll be the father and I'll be the husband. And what the consequence is going to be? You oppress them, I'll make your wives widows, and I'll make your children orphans. So don't do it. Now Rashi right away jumps in, and Rashi right away says, why are we picking on widows and orphans? Can I oppress, let's say you're not a widow or an orphan. Can I oppress you? No. I have no right to abuse you, to oppress you, to treat you badly. Not allowed to treat any person badly. So Rashi says because orphans and widows are often victims because they have no one to stand up for them and they've gone through a trauma, so they're broken people. And if you take advantage of a broken person, it's a horrible thing. I'll give you an example. They say, what is the word almon? Almana, what does it mean, a widow? It comes from the word Elaine. Elaine means she can't talk. Why can't she not talk? A, because she's afraid. There's no one to stand up for her. Or B, every day when she came home from work, she had a husband to talk to. Now when she comes home from work, who's in the house to talk to? Nobody. She doesn't talk at night anymore. There's no one to talk to. When she sits at the Shabbos table, who does she share what happened in the week with? Nobody. That means that the root of the word almana or almon comes from the word elaim, someone who can't talk. You're missing a piece of your life. Something is missing. Okay.
Until what age?
That's a good question. That was my next question. At what age? For example, take myself. Both my parents have passed away. That makes me an orphan.
Yeah.
Really? Am I an orphan?
No.
So the answer is, an orphan is up to the age when you become self-sufficient. That means an orphan is someone that's 5, 7, 10, 15. But once that child now gets married, has finished his education, has a job, has a house, and has a wife and starts having children, he's no longer an orphan. He has transformed himself into being a regular person. He's no longer an orphan. Okay? The same thing with a widow. You know, she has very much the same situation. She's no longer a widow once she's back on her feet and has established herself.
Is divorced lady counted as a
Yes,
widow?
many people include a divorced person. Now that's a little bit harder because a widow says, I never wanted my husband to die. A divorced person wanted to get divorced, you know, but still they're alone. Still they're vulnerable. Still they've been traumatized. So yes, it's considered to a degree part of it. I'll give you a bad example of a situation that happened many years ago. I get a phone call from a lady whose husband had died, and I ran scholarship funds. I had a fund of money where we used to help children in school with scholarships. And she called me up crying that they won't let her daughter in school. Okay, so I went down to the school, and I go there, the principal sees me, oh, he's so happy to see me, he knows me for many, many years. And right outside the first grade, there's this little girl on a chair, sitting outside the classroom, she's crying. And that's the girl. So I say to the guy, I say to the principal, I say, why is this student outside the class? Oh, there's a problem with the tuition. She didn't pay, the first month's tuition to get her entrance card. Schools, you have to pay and you get a card.
Yes.
So she's outside the classroom. I says, oh boy, that's terrible. I says, life is so short. Have you ever thought about where you want to be buried? He says, what? I said, yeah, sometimes people drop dead, and the family has no clue where to bury them. I know that my wife wants to be buried in Israel, and she's made it very clear. After 120, some people want to be buried in the United States, where some people like to be buried at Beth David or Elmont, different places, or in Israel, Har HaMenuchos, Har HaZeisim. Have you ever wondered where you want to be buried?
Said the principal.
Yeah, he says, well, why are you asking me that? That's crazy. What kind of a question is that? I says, well, you're an Orthodox Jew. I'm an Orthodox Jew. You believe in the Torah, right? He said, yeah. Because I'm just reading a pasuk here. It says, do not oppress widows and orphans. Because when they cry, and I think that girl is crying, Hashem says, I'm going to make your wives widows and your children orphans. That means you could drop dead tomorrow. Your family won't know where to bury you, so I want to be able to tell them where to bury you. This guy went nuts.
You made a psychic attack.
He doesn't talk to me anymore.
You made a psychic attack.
I thought he was going to kill me. And I was serious. I said, well, it's a pasuk, come on, let's read it together. Come on, let's read it together. Well, he went, within 10 minutes, she was back in the classroom. Okay? I tried to explain to him that she never asked for her father to die. She didn't want her father to die. The fact that her father died is painful to her. And the fact that they don't have tuition money, that's not her fault. So he says, why is it my fault? I says, it's not your fault. But she happens to be in your school. So you cannot treat her like everybody else. I understand you have a rule, you don't pay tuition, you don't go to class. That's for a person that has a father and a mother. She does not have a father. The Torah says you cannot do this. That's all. The Torah says if she cries, those tears is a death sentence.
Yeah. So he didn't know this part of the Torah.
Of course he did, but he wasn't thinking. He was, the board. He was following the rules. This is what the policy of the school is. I said, that's great. 99% of the time, that's the policy of the school. But it's not the policy of the school when you're dealing with an orphan. Orphans are different. They're treated different. I'm sorry she's an orphan. I really feel bad for her that she's an orphan. But it is different. I have a friend of mine who passed away. His yortzeit is this week on Wednesday. The wife called me. His wife called me up. He has one daughter who's like 8 years old, 9 years old in school here. And she wants to go to the cemetery, and she has a science project. So I explained to her, no problem, it's the yortzeit, you're going to go to the cemetery, but the teacher will take off points from my science project. I says, no, the teacher won't take off points from the science project. You have a partner, your partner will be there for the science project, but don't worry, the teacher will not take off points. But no, the teacher said, whoever's not there for the science fair, is gonna, if she has A, it will be down to a B,
They do.
right? They do that.
They do that.
I said, I understand, but that rule does not apply to you. Now, if the teacher does this on Wednesday and takes her A and makes it a B, on Thursday I'll call the teacher and I'll say, tell me where you want to be buried.
That's it.
Just tell me, and I just want to know. Because she's an orphan, you understand? She does not follow the rules. But I gotta treat everybody the same. No, you don't. Because the Torah says, be careful with an orphan. Because if she cries, Hashem says, I'll be her father, and you're not gonna be happy. Now, is that fair? That's Torah fair. That's not a science fair, it's Torah fair.
Hashem's
That's what the Torah says. I didn't write the Torah, I didn't make up the rules. But you need to understand that you cannot treat a child who's missed the science fair to go to the cemetery on the yard side of her father the same as a girl who decided to go to Chuck E. Cheese and miss the science fair. You can't treat them the same way. They're not the same. And as a teacher, you need to understand that. And if you don't, there's a bigger problem here than the science fair.
And what happened
What?
with this girl?
Well, we'll find out on Wednesday.
Oh, it's
She called me to say that she had permission from me, as the rabbi, to take her out of school and go to the cemetery for the yard site. And my answer was yes. Does she want to go? Yes, she wants to go to the cemetery
next week.
this week.
This week, the
Already.
Thursday, he's gonna call the
Thursday.
school.
Thursday, if she gets a lower grade. I said to her, don't worry, the teacher will not lower your grade.
So you call her.
I did not call her yet. If
You will.
necessary, I will.
How do you know that she's not going to do
She's
it?
gonna tell him.
I will make it very clear to her that she cannot lower her grade.
Yeah, but when you tell her,
I will tell her.
but you said she's not going
What
to
the
do
teacher's gonna understand, she's working the...
She'll understand. I'm very clear.
No,
She'll
I
understand.
know, but why she has to wait for your
I
phone
mean,
call? Maybe she has to...
These
Maybe she'll have the sense on her own.
She won't do it before you call her.
I don't know. We'll find out. Let's go on. There's a chazan, Rosh Hashanah. He's davening in shul. Beautiful voice. He's singing loud. All of a sudden, he goes and hits a high note, and there's a beautiful glass menorah in the shul, and the menorah shatters because of his voice. Now the shul goes over to him afterwards and says, you know, you broke the menorah. It cost $1,000, that menorah. You owe us $1,000. The chazan says, I never knew my voice could break glass. And it never happened to me before. What is the halacha? Does he have to pay the $1,000? He broke it with his voice. The answer is
No.
no.
No? Why?
Because it's considered an ones. He didn't intend to damage, right? Remember, he has to intend to damage. He didn't intend to damage, and he didn't know that his voice could damage. However,
Wow.
if he ever broke glass with his voice before,
You have to pay.
now he has to pay. Because he knows that his voice could break glass, so he has to be very, very careful for the future. So if he knows that his voice can break glass, then he has to make sure to pay. Okay?
Make a volume lower.
What?
Make a volume lower.
Whatever he has to do. Next.
Sometimes
Israel, Machne Yehuda. Have you ever been to Machne Yehuda in Israel? It's a big shuk. You know, in Yerushalayim, off Rehov
We
Yafo.
never even been in Israel.
Oh, you know, that's,
Three
you
of
have
us.
to go to school together with...
Three of us here.
Yeah, okay. We have to convince you to take your wife on a honeymoon to Eretz Yisrael.
And
You know
Sarah.
what? We should do a trip. One of these years, when I go, we should do a trip from Lefrak City to, you know,
Mizrach Hashem, one of the-
right.
one of
I'll
the-
take you to visit Rabbi Baruch, or you can go visit him. We'll have a good time. We'll have a great time.
Why not?
Okay, a tour.
You said it.
If we go visit the kids, it'll be very great. You know,
Okay.
we have such a good time. You should know.
They
with
just
your
came
kids.
like half year ago.
But you didn't tell us
Last
it
month.
was nice?
It was very nice. It was really very nice. They had a good time. They came over to me. I saw them. We had a very good time. Anyway, so this guy's in Machne Yehuda, and he's buying fruits and vegetables and chicken. You know, they sell fresh chicken for Shabbos. It's Friday. And then he sees his friend. And he says to his friend, I'm so happy to see you. I have these big, heavy packages to schlep. Are you going home? You have a car, right? You have a car. Because they live right next door to each other. He says, can I come home with you? He says, sure. So he loads everything up in the back of the car, the back seat, and he goes into the car, and they drive home, and he takes his packages, and they have a wonderful Shabbos. Come Sunday, the owner of the car opens up the car door, and the smell from inside the car, it reeks. It reeks.
Spoiled.
It seems that he had 3 or 4 packages. One package with a chicken inside, he left in the car.
Wow.
And it was during the summer, so it was hot. So it was in there all Friday and all Shabbos till Sunday morning. It had rotted away. The smell was so bad, he had to have the car detailed. Cost him hundreds of dollars. He had to have the carpets removed. So he goes to his friend, he says, listen, Moshe, I know you're my friend. I gave you a ride home. You left one of the packages in the car. The car is you can't go into the car. It cost me $300 to clean out the car. You owe me $300. Moshe says, I'm sorry, but I didn't mean to damage you. And I didn't do anything. It was the chicken, not me. And the chicken came into the car with your permission, right? I asked you permission, can I come into the car? You said yes. So it was with your permission. Maybe Friday, before you locked up the car, you should have checked the front and back to make sure it was clean.
He's right.
What is the halacha?
Wow.
He's right.
He's right.
The answer is he's right. He says, I didn't cause the damage. It was grama. It was only
Chicken caused
inadvertently.
it.
Chicken caused the damage. Now, so Rabbi Zilberstein poskin that he's not responsible. However, he spoke to Rebbe Yoshev, and Rebbe Yoshev says, no, it's not so simple. Because even though the chicken really damaged only at the end when it really rotted away, but the minute it was in the car, it was already in the heat becoming, spoiling. It wasn't noticeable yet. So he says, the minute you brought it into the car, you were already causing spoilage. And therefore, you should have been more responsible with it. And since you weren't responsible with it, you have to pay for the damage. So Rabbi Zilberstein changed his decision, and he said that he has to pay for the damage.
The full amount? Or?
For the full amount, the $300. Full amount.
For
He had
his
to
friend
pay.
Moshe?
Yeah, he had to pay for the full amount. Okay? Next. In Israel, when I was there learning yeshiva, they didn't have heat during the night. They had heat when you went to sleep. Let's say they turned on the heat for an hour, from 11 to 12.
Right.
So when you got undressed to go to sleep, it was a little bit warm. Then all night the heat was off. And then at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, the heat came back on again for an hour. So when you woke up, the room was warm. Because heat was very expensive. The heat was very expensive. What did we yeshiva guys do? We bought little electric heaters. And we would plug in a little electric heater near our bed, and that would keep us hot. And sometimes it was put on a timer. So here you have a dormitory of yeshiva boys, and one of the guys has a little electric heater. It's on a timer. It goes on about 2 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock. But at 11 o'clock, it's off. It's on the floor, it's off. So it's dark, and one boy comes home after the Beis Medrash, and he comes in, he doesn't even notice the heater on the chair. The heater was on the chair, and he took his jacket off, and he put it on the chair. At 2 o'clock in the morning, heat goes on, because the clock goes on, the jacket catches fire, the whole room is gutted. Like $10,000, $20,000 in damage. The boy says, who puts a heater on a chair? The other guy says, but that's what we always keep the heater. But it was off. It was on a timer. Is the guy who put the coat on the chair over the heater, not realizing it, does he have to pay the damage?
Wow.
He has to pay?
Does he?
No.
And the answer is no.
No.
The boy who put the heater on the chair is a putter, and the guy who put the coat on is putter. The owner has to pay it himself, because neither one intended to damage. It was done by accident. Neither one directly lit the fire. It was grama. It was done through timers. He says, maybe midine shamayim, The guy who put the coat on has to pay. But it's not so simple. You see, I'm trying to explain to you that when it comes to these type of situations, it's not so obvious that I have to pay. A person comes to your house, you invite him in, and he sits down on a chair. He's a heavy person. He sits down and the chair breaks. Does he have to pay you for the chair? So the answer is no. Now, if he's on the chair and he leans back on the chair and he abuses the chair, then he has to pay for it. But if he's sitting on the chair in the normal fashion, then the chair gave up its life, for a good cause. But that's all it is. It's you don't have to pay for the chair. It is what it is.
Is there allowed to put a heater in the dormitory?
So that's a good question. So they used to allow it by us. Even though it used electricity was also expensive in Israel, the yeshiva didn't care. Eventually the yeshiva had rules when they could and could not. Now they even have air conditioning and stuff like that. They never had that before. But yes, you're allowed to do
Wasn't
it.
it better for them to put the heat on instead of the...
Yeah, but remember, in these buildings, when you put the heat on, it wasn't just for one apartment, it was for the entire building. So they would buy oil, neft, it was kerosene, to heat up. So they had a certain fee you paid, and after they collected all the money, and they divided it for the cost, they would figure out how many hours a day they could give heat. And it was very hard, because you had children, little children, and if you only had heat an hour or two in the evening, and an hour or two in the morning, and those buildings in Israel, in Yerushalayim, are stone buildings.
Yeah.
It gets
Ice cold.
It gets ice cold. It gets very cold. So it's very hard. So that's why people had these space heaters. Okay? But that's what it was. But remember what I told you. The Zohar says at the end of the day, nobody walks away with $1 more or $1 less. Whatever happens, even if you think you were wronged, there is a bigger picture, and you have to keep an eye on the bigger picture. It takes a lot of emunah, it takes a lot of belief, but that's hopefully the plan. And don't take bribes from
Thank you.
anyone.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night, everyone.